or whatever, we're not.
I thought I had it like,
Nope.
for the think
It was just a standard rezoning request, and it didn't, the rezoning request didn't
literally came
match
from
the
Jones
zoning
County, so I'm kind of like,
plan, and it didn't match the rezoning, so we did our job by saying, it doesn't look right to us.
I don't know if it's
So
together.
I'll probably try to call him at some point. I just don't see that there's anything we can do unless somebody misrepresents the fact. You know, that would change, potentially change somebody's vote.
From my office.
Yeah.
Email advertisements and stuff.
And you're doing the application, remember?
Yes, I did. It came up on my phone.
Oh, very. All right, let me make sure I'm ready.
I had to, yeah, oh, I'm trying to make sure it's off. Look at all my lines to send me.
Everybody ready?
Carolina W. It goes somewhere.
Bill, you ready?
So, it didn't go.
Yeah, all right. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the regularly scheduled meeting for the Apex Town Council for April 4th, 2017. I'd like to call on Mayor Pro Tem Nicole Dozier for our invocation.
You will bow your heads with me, please. Dear Father, we welcome you to this meeting and acknowledge your presence here this evening. We hope in doing so that our work is done in a way that's pleasing to you on behalf of our constituents who are your people. We thank you for those who run towards danger and put themselves in harm's way to protect us, and for others who just find themselves to be their neighbor's brother, sister's or brother's keeper. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight. I appreciate your being willing to come out and be here for tonight's meeting. A couple things I do want to point out. There's a stapled agenda. It's a white piece of paper. Looks like this. This is what we'll be considering in tonight's business. Feel free to look through that if you see. We also I want to point out that during the public forum piece, which is at top of page 3, in order to be a speaker, you need to sign this yellow sheet here. We do have a limit of 15 people or 45 minutes, whichever comes first. So I'd like to make sure that sheet is full, and I can't see that it is or isn't right now. But I'd like to make sure that everybody also picked up a yellow sheet, and I didn't bring the example copy with me up here, but there's a yellow sheet on that podium that gives you the guidelines for speaking at a public meeting. I would strongly encourage you to read through that and make sure you're familiar with all of that in there. Primary reason is while we do want public input, we also have a duty to perform the town's business, and so we want to find that happy medium where we listen to enough input, but at the same time we carry on with town's business. The other thing I'd like to say is if you, during any part of the meeting tonight, one of the items on there, you'll see there's a way for you to applaud using deaf applause, where you put your hands in the air and wave them. So if someone here says something or someone here says something that you appreciate, we can see that, and it allows us to continue working and talking without an audio interruption. I'd like to encourage you to try that. Everybody do that? There you go. We've done this many times before, so if this is your first time, congratulations. But it works very well. We do see that up here as a council. Again, if you did not get one of the yellow sheets from out there and you did sign up that you want to speak, I encourage you to go get that so you can become familiar with the rules. With that, we now move into the time of presentations. Our first presentation is Mayor Pro Tem Nicole Dozier, and she has something on Think Apex Day.
Go ahead and jump right into it. So whereas Think Apex was created in 2014 as an initiative to encourage a local mindset by all parts of the Apex community, including businesses, residents, and visitors, it encourages those in and around Apex to support and invest in the local and unique aspects of our community in order to create a stronger and more vibrant economic environment and quality of life. By fostering a local mindset, Think Apex empowers the community to celebrate, engage, play, volunteer, shop, eat, and work locally. And whereas Think Apex has a unique web presence that promotes local events, small businesses, and an award ceremony that highlights members of the community who make a large impact. And whereas the Think Apex webpage averages approximately 1,000 page views per month. And whereas the first annual Think Apex Awards were given in 2016 with over 60 nominees and 6 top thinkers were recognized. And whereas a new component to this growing initiative is Think Apex Day, which will be a day dedicated to giving back to the Apex community by thinking and acting in ways that will positively impact the town and the people who live here. And whereas citizens can go to the Think Apex webpage at www.thinkapex.biz to get more information on Think Apex Day and to register for multiple volunteer opportunities and activities. And whereas citizens can also create their own activities and share those by posting on social media using the hashtag PeakProud. Now, therefore, the Apex Town Council does hereby proclaim Saturday, April 29, 2017 as Think Apex Day in the town of Apex and encourages all citizens to consider some form of participation, either formal or otherwise, that will further enhance the commitment to our community and to one another. And I'm going to pass it to my mayor.
All right, thank you. And so the last part of this says, in witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the town of Apex, North Carolina, to be affixed on this day, the 4th of April, 2017. So I'll be signing that, and we'll proclaim that day, there you go, Think Apex Day. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you.
All right. Now we move on to presentation number 2. While Russell Dalton is coming up to the front, let me just, by a show of hands, how many of you came tonight because of the topic of Apex Peakway Southwest Connector? All right, thank you. During this presentation, and some of you may have seen this online, but Russell Dalton will be talking through several points, so I would encourage you to follow through some of the facts that he has put together. This is a presentation from staff to council so that we can make sure that we're up to date on the latest. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Russell Dalton.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to talk about our project, the Apex Peakway Southwest Connector. It's an update. We're wrapping up preliminary design, getting ready to go into final design. First of all, talking briefly about the project purpose. It's intended to improve both mobility and connectivity in Apex. It started back in 1965 and it was actually included in the first transportation plan in 2002. The Peakway will allow shorter local trips to areas between NC 55 and Salem Street on the west side of town. It will link Salem Village directly to Salem Street. It'll provide a local western bypass to NC 55 in the event of an unexpected closure. It'll also provide pedestrian access across the railroad tracks on that side of town and will increase traffic capacity to serve a high-growth area. During this latest round of public meetings, there were some questions that came about the history of the project and reasons behind the current recommended design, including why we can't have an at-grade crossing at this location. So I'm going to go back through some of the history and take some time to explain that. First of all, around 2004, 2005, we found out that CSX would require 3 public road crossings for every 1 new public road to cross their tracks. At the time, we were looking at both the north and south sections that were currently not complete. Between those 2 areas, the north section that has been complete since that time, we had 2 crossings on the north side, and we now have this 3rd final crossing on the south side. So that's actually 3 crossings of the Peakway that we're looking at that time. So if you talk about 3 closures required per new crossing, 3 times 3 is actually 9 closings. So at the time, we were faced with a rather daunting task of trying to figure out if we needed to get all those at grade, were there 9 public railroad crossings in Apex that we could actually close. So around that time, our town manager, Bruce Radford, came up with a really interesting and creative idea to pursue purchasing other railroad crossings from other towns. So there was a News and Observer article about that. So and you could see he pursued purchasing crossings from towns that might need some extra vehicles, they might be able to use the money for something else, and there might be some railroad crossings they just don't really need, because we thought most of our crossings, if not all our crossings in Apex, were critical to the operation of the town. What we were told from CSX is, they appreciated the creative approach, but they would not allow us to purchase railroad crossings from other towns in order to trade. We had to do those closings here. So their goal is to minimize conflicts along the rail corridor, and at that point, faced with no other alternatives, we began negotiating a master agreement with CSX with the involvement of the NCDOT Rail Division. Coming out of those negotiations, there was first a term sheet in 2008 leading to the master agreement in 2009. As part of the master agreement, we were required to have grade separations from the S-line, which carries CSX and Amtrak on both the north and south ends of the Peakway. We were allowed in one new at-grade crossing for what's considered the low-speed, low-volume freight line spur to Durham, which was the SDS line. We were required to close Moore Street, which we've done with the completion of the north section. We were also required to close Tingen, which is yet to be done. And we're also to pursue closure of multiple private crossings. The private crossings don't really count for much, but as part of preserving the corridor, as part of development plans, CSX was seeking to minimize any kind of exposure to private crossings that are typically not signalized. They're very low volume, but there's a lot of risk there because people don't typically have the gates and lights to warn them of an oncoming train. Also, it leads to, when you have those private crossings, it also leads to a lot more train noise because, there's, like the quiet zone we pursued recently, there's no ability to have a quiet zone for those private crossings because they're not controlled. We completed the Peakway North in January of 2012. We constructed the bridge over the S-line, which you can probably see from here through the trees. We constructed the at-grade crossing over the SDS line, which is a low-speed freight line with gates and lights. We also closed the Moore Street crossing, and we closed 3 of the private crossings on the north side as part of development plans and public streets that were connected to provide alternate access to those land uses. So coming from the agreement, I guess you talk about a 3-for-1 deal. That was sort of a 2-for-1 deal. So, that was, I hate to say the best deal we could get, but it really was. It was the best deal we could get. We had Tingen Road closure, we had Moore Street closure tied to one new connection on the Peakway North. So that was the deal we got, as opposed to closing 3, we had to close 2. But starting in 2015, we began our feasibility study process. We had a public workshop showing 3 grade separated alternatives, and 2 actually went under. The under options were an idea that came from our planning department because they, obviously for a lot of reasons, didn't like the over alternative, didn't like the bridge. It was the assumption we were operating under since as early as 2004 when we first developed some concepts. We thought it was a novel idea. We actually had some hope that it would be a better solution, maybe a more cost-effective solution, and minimize some impacts. So we came up with two under alternatives. From that, from that study in January 27th of 2016, we had a follow-up meeting with Salem Village following that workshop to discuss in more detail some of their comments. Then we had a feasibility study presentation in February to talk about the 3 alternatives in front of the council, but no decision, no recommendation at that time. Following then in February, a little bit later, Whitehall Manor residents met with us in a follow-up meeting to discuss some of their comments and concerns. And then, on April 5th, we approved a preliminary design contract. So, on May 6th of 2016, we had an agency scoping meeting at Town Hall. This is the point where we're starting to look in more detail at these alternatives to find out what is feasible. Because what we were finding out through the feasibility study process was that the 2 under alternatives were extremely difficult for a lot of reasons in dealing with CSX, and dealing with cost and other complications, drainage, road closures at Salem Street. So this scoping meeting was held to determine the path forward in actually, understanding what we were going to be doing in preliminary design, because we didn't feel like we were going to be designing preliminarily 3 complete alternatives and continuing to question which ones can or can't be built. We wanted an answer. We didn't want to spend a lot of time and resources trying to get a no on the efforts we were undergoing at that time. So on June 8th, we did get input from CSX, and they said they recommend Alternative 1 to minimize disruption to their track. They didn't see a reason why that we would be realigning their track temporarily to build a bridge for them, to move them back. They said we had to maintain their track speed during that time. They said they would review any plans we gave them, but that was not a guarantee that they would approve any plans that we gave them, because to them, the overall alternative made sense because it was avoiding their track. On June 10th, we had an agency concurrence meeting at the Capital Area MPO office to discuss this. This is Federal Highway, this was Rail Division, this was NCDOT, MPO staff, the town, the consultant, discussing the input we had received. At that meeting, it was recommended that we proceed with that alternative one. I had also asked them at the time what we should seek from Apex Town Council, and they said it would be a good idea to bring the alternatives back to the council, present the information, and ask for a recommendation. And our recommendation was alternative one. So we did that on August 2nd. We had a presentation as part of old business, asked for a recommendation for alternative one. We received that recommendation from town council for alternative one, and began to move forward with preliminary design based on the bridge going over. In 2016, at the end of the year, again December, we held a preliminary design public workshop. So at that point we had a lot more detail on what was the recommended alternative. At this point we had gotten the recommendation, we had settled on that alternative, we provided a lot more design information about impacts. So then following that, we held a meeting with town staff, the consultant, Rail Division, and had a conference call with CSX to talk about the preliminary design, to talk about those details, and get some guidance from CSX on moving forward into final design. Following that, we had 3 separate neighborhood meetings. We invited the neighborhoods into Town Hall. I gave a presentation in the council chambers, individually to Shangri-La, Whitehall Manor, and Salem Village. The point of that was to explain where we currently were, get input on the process, and take that into our final design. So just to recap the scope for the Southwest project, it involves construction of a bridge over the railroad tracks, temporary closure of that section of the Peakway, which would close Towhee and also close the Peakway from Towhee down to Salem Street, because the grade is coming up, so there's no way to keep that open during construction. There's a northeast quadrant loop to maintain connectivity to South Salem Street. In the original designs back prior to and during feasibility study, we had a relatively compact loop tied to Salem Street. One thing that came out of preliminary design is that loop expanded. It's using most of that area now, if not all of that area, that's out in front of Shangri-La that's unoccupied. It's just a large field. So that impact has grown, but luckily there are no relocations as part of that. We anticipate traffic signals on both connections of the loop road. There'll be additional turning lanes on Apex Peakway and on South Salem Street to serve the traffic. Again, this is based on updated traffic projections, determining what kind of lanes we have to provide. And also, we have to close Tingen Road as part of our master agreement. Again, this was our 2-for-1 deal for the whole corridor. But we are pursuing a Z-Gate pedestrian crossing currently. That's the latest development, discussing with CSX, because we believe pedestrian connectivity is important to maintain there. It would be similar to what we have over here at the old Thompson Street crossing. Federal Highway considers that a safe crossing for pedestrians, so that's what we pursue as part of this design. And it's a relatively well-used crossing if you've been out there. A lot of people on bikes and people walking across that section. So, you know, the alternative would be complete barricade with fencing on both sides, which, you know, we had a lot of concerns about that from a pedestrian safety standpoint. So here is the preliminary design that we showed in the preliminary design workshop. This is our map. Just generally, you can see the quadrant loop used to come in about here, so now it's expanded. It's a 4-lane loop. There's actually a free flow lane coming off to increase efficiency coming off the loop as well. But we've got a 4-lane bridge, so in the ultimate design for the Peakway, we won't have to replace the bridge or build another bridge next to the bridge. That'll save us in the long run. It also helps to accommodate the additional turning lanes for the intersections, because even if you didn't build the 4-lane bridge, you'd be building something like a 3-lane or 3.5-lane bridge, so you're just short of building a 4-lane bridge anyway. So it made sense from an economic standpoint to go ahead and do it for the ultimate section. And then you've got Towhee up here would be right in, right out. The grade would come up a little bit with Towhee. At this point, you have walls on either side of the Peakway. This inside of the quadrant loop is some reserved area we'll talk about later. On the south side, you've got fill slopes coming out into this area, which we received some comments about those as well, and turn lanes for James Street. So here's the visualization. One of the things that came out of preliminary design was discussion with the railroad about being able to provide a support in between the railroad tracks and Salem Street. One of the things that allows us to do is bring that structure depth down, so it'll reduce the height of the overall project, reduce the height of the walls, so that helps to minimize impacts. This also shows the brick treatment, like you'll see on 540 on those bridges. We'd also plan to do a embossed Apex Peakway name on the wall, similar to what 540 has. And you can see the lanes a little bit better on the loop. You know, left turn lane onto the loop, left and right turn lanes coming off, and actually 8-foot sidewalks on both sides of the bridge to provide pedestrian connectivity. So some of the updates, we're beginning coordination to incorporate some kind of art display into the Quadrant Loop area. I don't know if we'll decide on a piece of art during this project. I don't want the project to be, you know, required to do that necessarily, but we do want to provide an area to provide the town that opportunity, because it's one of the comments we got. We're still planning those decorative brick walls you saw in the visualization. We plan to include landscaping along the project where possible, including adjacent to the Whitehall Manor and Shangri-La areas, and on the fill slopes between James Street and CSX. That was another comment we got in that area. We'll update the designs to include sidewalk down to Salem Village. We had concerns about pedestrian safety with the Peakway being connected, so we're going to provide additional sidewalk connections down in that area on both sides of the Peakway, even down to Padstone Drive, where they have the amenity center across the road from a lot of the neighbors in Salem Village. And also that Salem Village plan already includes a plan for a high visibility crosswalk at Padstone. People were concerned about pedestrian safety there, so you know, one of the things we need to evaluate in the future is whether or not that's a candidate for something like a rapid flash beacon. We've installed one of those in town. We've had mixed success with it, as they've seen across the state where some of these have been implemented, so we want to make sure that whatever we recommend is going to be the best system for that location. We considered a roundabout at James Street because that was one of the comments. The concern about that, from our perspective, was that the grade is just too steep. Typically, the roundabout, you know, maximum cross slope is about 3 to 4%. You're talking about a road coming down at around 7%. So you can imagine a circle on a grade and what kind of problem that would be for circulating vehicles. It would cause a problem in the alignment of the road, and you know, potentially be a safety concern. So we can't recommend a roundabout there, but we have recommended turn lanes, you know, left turn lanes on the Peakway to maximize safety in that location. Towhee Drive will be right in, right out, but it will maintain direct connectivity to the Peakway, and that'll be good as far as residents being able to exit Whitehall to get directly onto the Peakway, to go south, you know, through Salem Village and toward 55, without having to reroute through other areas of the neighborhood. It'll also help for getting into the neighborhood if you've got emergency services trying to get into that part of the neighborhood. Maintaining connectivity there from that perspective is very important. And then we did already conduct traffic studies in Whitehall on a couple of different roads, Applethorne and Grappenhall, because there are concerns about impacts from construction traffic detours, you know, during the project and after the project even is completed, that people might try to detour to bypass the loop. You know, one of the things we considered is once construction begins and that section of the Peakway closes, we would propose to go in there and do another study, look at the traffic comparison. If there is an issue, if it meets our traffic calming criteria, at that time we could recommend either temporary or permanent speed humps along that route to discourage cut-through traffic. If they're temporary, that gives us the opportunity that after the project is complete, if it falls below that threshold, we could actually remove those. And also, as far as acquisitions, we're required to pay fair market value for any acquisitions following the Federal Uniform Act. Those owners that are impacted by the project in terms of easements or right-of-way being acquired will be contacted by an appraiser, and they'll have an opportunity to meet with that appraiser during the process and discuss their property and discuss the things that they're looking for and the things they're concerned about. Those right-of-way discussions will occur following final design but before construction. That's anticipated to be late this year, early next year, pending the result of final design. One of the things in final design that could slow us down is CSX coordination in the past. I know that's depending on what you're dealing with CSX and what reviewer you're dealing with can take a lot of extra time. This alternative minimizes that exposure to CSX because we're supposedly not affecting their track by going over, but again, we're in there right away with some of the things we're having to do, so we still have to coordinate with them and obtain encroachments. Construction is anticipated to take about a year. During that time, as I said, Towhee would be closed. If we can have an opportunity to offer an incentive to the contractor to get Towhee open sooner, or get the loop connection to Salem Street open sooner than the bridge, we'll attempt to do that to accelerate those connections. Again, that's driven a lot by just how the project is being constructed and the most efficient way to do it. It's hard to do a phased project for something like this without actually slowing down the entire project, extending the construction schedule and causing problems, because when you're raising the grade, you're having to build walls along with the bridge, you're having to get in there and do a lot of work at the same time. You can't really stage those areas and build part of a wall and stop and do it in an efficient manner. It also drives up, of course, cost anytime you start trying to phase construction. So here's our schedule. So right now, we're wrapping up the NEPA document, after our meetings, but we'll be going to the final design through this year. Anticipated to start in spring, summer next year and complete about 12 months later in 2019. We do have a public hearing planned for Town Council in fall of 2017. We were going to have that this spring, but the consultant wanted to give time to get more information in the design, because there's still a lot of things to determine in terms of property impacts and easements, and they wanted to have those answers before we had that public hearing. So at this point, that wraps up the presentation. Are there any questions?
Did anybody see anything they want to follow up with, Russell?
Yeah, I have a few questions.
All right.
Obviously, one of the concerns is the proximity of the wall to the neighbors. Is there any possible way to shift the road alignment down? I guess that would be east, even a little, like 50 to 100 feet, to get more buffering in there?
In 2004, we actually looked at a concept trying to shift the road east, and of course, since then, we've got more information as far as the design. Any amount of shift, even a 50-foot shift, pushes the entire project over toward the Shangri-La property. You've got at least one trailer and one residence on that corner, so what would end up happening is you're starting to force relocations. So we have to compare. We've got a project now that in effect does not cause any forced relocations. We're not buying out any residences. That also gets us into an issue with the federal document, because we have to look at economic justice and consider the impacts to Shangri-La that would be caused by shifting the roadway. You're essentially, you're threading the needle between Whitehall and Shangri-La, so there's not really a lot of room, really no room to move at that point.
Okay. And at one point, we looked at having a sound barrier wall, which I know would exacerbate the wall issue, but it would lower the noise issue.
Okay.
Is that under consideration at all?
Well, based on the noise study, and we can talk about that more in final design if we're trying to pursue something, there were 5 properties that were considered to be impacted based on the noise abatement policy. The consultant looked at it, and it was considered not feasible or not practical to mitigate those measures. Keep in mind, the wall itself is a sound insulator, so if you're up against the wall, you're going to be insulated from sound. The difference is when you raise the road up, there's going to be a projection over, so the sound is going to impact properties further from the wall, not directly adjacent to it. So I guess what you're talking about is building some kind of a wall on top.
Yeah, some kind of to dim the barrier.
Yeah, I'd asked the consultant about that, and again, they did not recommend anything like that. We can ask for more detail about that during final design and see if that's possible. It does increase the visual height of the wall, so that might be a concern depending on what it, whatever kind of barrier that looks like. And also, if you do that on one side, it's going to reflect sound to the other side, and that would be a concern. So are you building walls on both sides, in which case you're reflecting sound up and out? So those are some other things we have to consider.
I'd still like to consider it,
Okay.
see what they recommend.
Okay.
Another thing is, how much right-of-way is there between the wall and the property line of the homeowners in Whitehall Manor along that section there. The reason I'm asking is, what can we do if it comes to this to really heavily landscape the area, build, plant tall trees to really block that wall? I've not really seen anything related to that yet.
Yeah, that's one of the things we'll have to figure out during final design and dealing with those owners, because it may depend on, individual lots and what they're looking for in terms of screening. The wall is almost right on the right of way. I mean, there's really not a lot of room. We're gonna have to get easements, for construction, and we're gonna have to get easements for any kind of utilities, and also easements to get on the property to do any kind of landscaping that would be possible. But that would be part of the negotiations for the right of way.
Temporary easements, is that what
We would get temporary and permanent easements
Oh, okay.
on private property,
Okay.
and that's where we would have to acquire those easements through that, Uniform Act process.
Well, I would like to recommend you treat that as a high priority, because obviously this is a big issue, and, we're kind of in a rock and a hard place here, so I'd like to make sure that's addressed. I don't know if we'll ever address it to the satisfaction of everybody here, but to the extent that we can, I'd like to make it a priority.
And one of the other things we heard, of course, is with people that had fencing, and that's another thing that, of course, if they've got existing fencing, we could replace that fencing. The question is what position that fencing would be in relation to what easements are proposed and what landscaping's proposed.
Okay. And you said we will not have to, evict anybody as far as eminent domain goes, we'll not take any property line?
Correct.
Okay. All right. That's all I have.
The wall looked like it was pure vertical. Could it be set back under the highway a bit to allow for planting, so it's more of a pedestal arrangement? I would think that that might be better. It'd be something to look at for the neighbors.
That's a good point.
We could ask that question, but I think what you're talking about are these MSE walls essentially have to be vertical. You would probably get into a different type of product, that might be, I hate to venture a guess, I'm not a structural engineer, but what they would try to do, but you're essentially moving an MSE wall in and creating some kind of structural support out for the roadway, so the roadway would bridge over.
Yeah, but the roadway ties both the walls together. I would think structurally,
Yeah.
it would be a hat section in that consideration, that.
Yeah, you would be adding, you would be adding to the structural design, because you would
Yeah,
have
no
structure
doubt.
outside of the footprint of the wall that would normally retain all the roadway and the sidewalks. But, yeah, we can certainly ask that question to see if it can be narrowed.
Are we compensating the neighbors right along that wall for any devaluation of their property? I know the Peakway's been planned for a long, long time, but,
It would be part of the appraiser's process. Again, I'm not a property appraiser, but they would take that into account when we acquire those
okay,
easements, yeah.
so that they could be,
Yeah, they would
Made
look
whole,
at the project
if that's possible.
impact based on those lots. They're gonna look at the easement and then the project situation, and they would discuss with those owners and come up with a value, and that's a process that, we leave to the appraisers. We certainly
Yeah.
answer engineering questions, but it would be up to them, because they are the professionals when it comes to that.
Russell, what's the reasoning for creating a right on Towhee in the Peakway? Why not have full access at that intersection?
Because of the distance from the, where the loop ties in, you can't have full movement there. You'd have conflicting turn lanes.
Okay, where
Yeah.
the loop comes up.
Yeah, you could, and one of the ideas we thought about is it would be, if Shangri-La wasn't where it was, with their street tying in across from Towhee, you could have brought the loop up to tie in directly across from Towhee and Whitehall Manor, but the problem is, then you start getting into relocations if you start having to move the loop up, to tie in across from Towhee and Whitehall Manor.
One more question, I'm sorry. This is the north section right here, right? When you go over that bridge, it kinda curves a little bit. Have we considered curving this bridge away from the homeowners, so it's less of an impact as opposed to just going a straight line? Have we considered curving it, like out, because we own that property on the corner where the loop is, right?
No, that's the Shangri-La's property.
We're buying that corner property where we're building the loop at?
Yeah, we'll have to acquire that property
Have we
as well.
considered arching the bridge like that?
Again, you've got fixed tangent points north and south, so pushing it over, you're still, to curve it, you'd have to push it over towards Shangri-La, you're also coming back down into Salem Village and you're pushing it toward, because right now it's in between parcels on both sides of the Peakway and Salem Village, so you're starting to push it east towards Salem Village and create more impact on the east side for any residents that are in Salem Village. You have a certain design standard to meet, and also when you start talking about curving a bridge, you're talking about increasing the structure depth of the bridge, which is gonna increase the height of the wall and the entire project. So the grades on either end are gonna be steeper in addition to that.
I don't recall seeing any, of those concepts put forth. Now, if we got a point A and point B and you have as little impact after you pass the properties on Shangri-La and then you just arch it, I don't know if I recall seeing any of that concept design. I'm assuming it was thought about or...
In 2004, we looked into it as a concept, and the problem again was the impact. It was pushing impact onto Shangri-La because there was a question asked then, and that was early when we found out that CSX did not want us crossing at grade and began the discussion about the 3-for-1 requirement. You know, when the consultant looked at it, you know, they're looking at a fixed point, a tangent wedged in between properties on both sides with occupied dwellings, and a fixed point on the south side of the track wedged in between properties on both sides. You know, curving that out is gonna cause a disproportionate impact, and that's what they would not want to recommend. You know, they would not want to pursue that because it wouldn't be able to be justified in the environmental document.
Yeah, we did pursue that quite a bit, actually, in 2004, that exact thought. I still have trouble with the loop. We have to have that loop as long as it is because we're coming up a little bit on grade. Is that what the deal is?
The loop is actually for vehicular storage, for meeting that 2040 long-term projection,
Oh,
traffic projection.
okay, because it seemed like it was long, but that's true.
Yeah, we had a shorter design. Also, I mean, of course, the tighter the loop is, of course, you're reducing design speeds and operational. I mean, could impact safety slightly with a tighter loop. But based on preliminary design, when they looked at it, we needed the extra storage and we needed the longer loop for acceleration and deceleration on and off Salem Street.
Question I just thought of is, we've been looking at Shangri-La and not wanting to displace anybody, thinking that would be a negative thing, but have we ever asked anybody there that maybe they'd wanna be displaced if, the money was right? So have we considered that?
We talked to the owner concerning the possibility for a temporary on-site detour in that area for relocations, and for him, it's a matter of money in terms of relocating the units, paying for lost rent, new units, those kind of things. So it's a money issue, but it's also an issue in terms of, we're applying for federal funding. We have a federal document for this project, and if we're affecting relocations, then that's viewed negatively.
Even if it's voluntary? People say, hey, for the right price, I'll sell you my property.
Yeah, I guess when it comes to that, a park like that, it's voluntary is an interesting question, because I guess you've got someone who owns the land, but you've also got a tenant on that property. So you could get into a situation where somebody maybe doesn't want to move, but maybe that property owner thinks they can make some money off of it.
I'd still like to pursue that, because maybe both parties would want to move. Maybe you pay the landowner some money, and then the person who's the homeowner.
Just not to the end that we risk losing federal funding to assist the project, right?
I think it's a greater way of looking at this.
Yeah, all I'm saying is pursue it, ask the questions.
Yeah, we'll ask the question of the consultant, and we also have to deal with Federal Highway as part of this, and see what they say in terms of the design. But again, I mean, anytime you start pushing the project out, we're talking about trying to curve it away, you're dealing with disproportionate impacts, and you're also affecting design, which is raising everything else.
I guess I understand, I want to try to get as many options on the table as possible, so we can, evaluate them all.
Yeah, we may be able to come up with a quick concept just to see what that looks like and have that discussion. That may be good enough to at least get an answer to the question, if it can be answered that way.
Okay, thank you.
So, I have a question for you related to having lived in a cul-de-sac, you have very little property in the front typically, and then you have more in the back and more of the pie shape. So I wonder, what is the impact on the folks, their sanctuary, their backyard, their trees, play sets, that kind of thing? So what's the impact for those folks in that cul-de-sac?
Well, I mean, the impact again would be, I mean, you're taking what now is their property stops and you have public right-of-way pretty much at grade, and you're raising the road up. So you're creating, you know, in this case at Salem Street, you're creating a wall. At the end of their property, you know, you've got the wall, and that's it. And you're gonna have easements next to that wall, and then somewhere in that area, you're gonna have fencing if they expect fences to be done, landscaping in those areas to help buffer the effect. So it could reduce, if you're talking about like an open yard, it could reduce the open area.
So I'm thinking of those who have play sets in there,
Okay.
and then the fences. So you mean, you know, taking the play sets out, taking the fencing, and then redoing, so they're gonna be losing property, but they're losing the things that they did to improve their yards already?
Yeah, I mean, those things that would fall under the Uniform Act in terms of compensation, and that's part of the reason the appraisers, meet with owners on site when requested, because they can discuss those kind of issues. If you have a play set that has to be removed, and you say, hey, this play set has got to be removed, you need to pay me for this, and it's got some monetary value, whether it needs to be moved or, you know, in the yard, whatever it takes to do that, or buy a new play set for another location in the yard, you know, any features like that would be part of the process.
Any other environmental impacts to runoff, drainage, if you're talking about building a wall? And so what are those impacts, environmental impacts to those folks' yards?
We would have to acquire any easements to maintain drainage. You know, we're not going to cause any drainage problems on anybody's property. You know, certainly if that's a concern, we'll, you know, final design, we're going to be dealing with those kind of details and resolve those issues.
Thank you.
So the plan could, you believe the bridge could capture all of the stormwater that is falling on the impervious surface of the bridge, capture it and take it away from that area as effectively as it currently is with no bridge? In other words, you wouldn't have runoff.
Onto the yards, is
Yeah.
what you're saying?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to cause a problem for any of those homeowners. As far as that goes, I mean, we'll have to look at the fine details in preliminary design, determine exactly where the stormwater's going, how it's being managed, and, any easements we'd need for that, we have to acquire.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Russell.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes our presentations. At this time, we now turn to our consent agenda. This is where we take a look at the items that are typically to be enacted by a single motion by the council without discussion. If a council member, however, wishes to remove an item for later discussion, they certainly may do so. At this time, I'll ask if there's a motion for consent agenda or if there is an item that someone wants to pull for later discussion.
Make a motion, we approve consent agenda?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve consent. Is there any further discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, consent agenda is approved unanimously. And at this time, we now move to approving the regular meeting agenda. This is where we set our agenda for the night. As you can see, we have a fairly straightforward agenda tonight. This time I'll ask for a motion to approve the regular meeting agenda.
Just to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, the agenda is set. At this time, we now move to public forum. Public forum is an opportunity for the public, that is you, to address the council. You as a speaker are requested not to address an item that appears as a public hearing. Well, we don't have any public hearings tonight, so that's not a problem. At this time, I will recognize those who have signed up to speak tonight. Would appreciate if you could remember the order that I call your name so that when the next person is up, you can go ahead and stand in the aisle. That way we can have people come right one after the other. At this time, I'll call the first four names. Chris Boudreau, it looks like Landon Carroll marked to number 1. Is that okay? All right. Landon Carroll, Chris Boudreau, Greg Dallas, Allison Gant. And please recognize the 3-minute rule. We have the green, yellow, and red light there on the side. So when you see yellow, you got just a handful of seconds left.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Introduce yourself when you speak, your name and your address, and then proceed.
Okay, Landon Carroll, 101 Pine Nut Lane. I'm here to comment on the traffic, situation at Thales Academy. Recently, Apex put up digital traffic signs, several weeks back, that said no stopping in the road for carpool. This was on Apex Peakway and Hunter Street. They also took to Facebook to make an announcement on the Apex Police page. After feedback from some Thales parents, Mayor Olive commented that he'd look forward to opening dialogue and working together to find a solution on this situation. The Thales principal then met with the police chief and planner about a week later. The result of this meeting was the police chief sending a letter out through the principal to Thales families. The letter basically said he was asking for assistance. Also mentioned that such actions could be a violation of a NC General statute and a town ordinance that are enforceable by law enforcement officers. Two things on this. There was no working together to find a solution. Nothing came of this meeting. The letter that the chief sent out was exactly what was said prior to the meeting. Second thing, I've reviewed the general statute and ordinance listed. I don't even think it applies to this situation. I think it applies to cars blocking the road or being parked in the road. Traffic is when a car is waiting to turn on a road that has other traffic. Happens all over this town. Happens at every public school, St. Mary Magdalene, waiting to get on US 1. Happens all over the place. So if that's a violation of that ordinance or that general statute, then tickets could be written all over this town at the rate that it's going. I submitted a public records request for a traffic study for the site plan approval for Thales. That traffic study has apparently been lost, but Russell Dalton provided me with a synopsis of that study. It was understood in that study that Amber Gate Station that runs through Hunter Street Park would experience carpool queuing on the street. This was prior to any plans to build Hunter Street Park. I then submitted a public record request for the traffic study for Hunter Street Park. I was told a traffic study was never done. I guess it doesn't meet the threshold to actually complete a traffic study for a park that size. The problem now is the park has parking spaces all down Amber Gate Station with signs that the town Parks and Rec Department has put up saying no blocking parking spaces. Well, if you go back to the original study, that road was designed, or that site was approved that Amber Gate Station would have queuing for carpool in the original traffic study. So essentially what's happened by putting in Hunter Street Park, putting in the spaces along that road, putting in signs that say no blocking parking, people aren't queuing on Amber Gate Station. It's backing up onto Hunter Street, and now it's become an issue with the Apex Police Department back on Thales when the site was originally approved for queuing on Amber Gate Station.
All right, thank you, Mr. Carroll. I'm sorry your time has expired.
Okay, thank you.
Chris Boudreau?
My name is Chris Boudreau. I live at 1009 Applethorne Drive. I'm in Whitehall Manor, the proposed location of the bridge with the wall. I've got petitions here signed by 235 residents and 295 online electronic petitions here. A few people. I represent 196 houses. I sent a letter to everybody last night explaining the position that was never brought out by the planning department as far as options for this bridge. He says you can almost see the bridge on the north side. Well, if you look out your back window when this is done, you'll see the wall and the bridge 25 feet out your back window, and that's all you're ever going to see. So my plan, I said, well, why don't you shift it over and shift the tracks over so everybody shares in this Peakway Bridge idea. Salem Village gets to see some of it, we get to see some of it. As the plan sits now, they see nothing but a berm with no houses built right up against their bridge. This is planned in 1965. Why was it now thought of when they were developing Whitehall Manor to say, hey, there's be a wall here, don't build any houses along this road? Because it wasn't thought out since 1965. The plan might have been there, but you guys made the decision, and it may not have been anybody on the council now, it may not have been on your watch, but it's on my watch now too, because I was not the president of the HOA, I am now. So, somebody made the decision 5 or 6 years ago, where it was to be a grade separated crossing on the south side. Why don't you put the grade separated crossing on the north side, let us have our grade separation, close Tingen, which is near us, and close the one on the north side here, and build a bridge over the north. I know you've already done that, I want to belittle the point. You talked about quality of life, Think Apex, positive impacts on the town. How is this gonna be a positive impact on our neighborhood? And everybody coming from Magnolia right now, hitting Towhee to get to the Peakway, will do the same thing to get onto the, to get onto the bridge. That's what's gonna happen if you do a right in, right out on Towhee into our neighborhood. Nobody on that end of the neighborhood wants it. I live on the direct path going along that route, so I see all the traffic. Traffic studies are good. I just don't think this is the right thing to do. We need to share the bridge with everybody. Nobody here lives in Whitehall Manor, near the bridge, near the wall, aka the wall, I kept calling it, you saw the email. So I just want to share our neighborhood's opposition to this. The mayor gave me a nice reply this morning at 6:11. It was very nice, not practicable. It may not be practical, but it's possible to shift everything. You're going to spend $450,000 to buy crossings from all these other neighborhoods to get 9 crossings bought. Spend some of that money to talk to CSX about shifting that railroad back and shifting the bridge over a little bit and get it out of our neighborhood. That's all we're asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boudreaux. Greg Dallas, and then Allison Gant, Maria Sierra, and then Greg James.
Greg Dallas, 1012 Daresbury Drive. Mayor, council members, citizens. I don't want to repeat a lot that's been said. I commend you for the questions you've asked. Tough questions with very little answers, a lot to go in and find out facts about. I'll try not to be redundant. A couple of things that were key, though. 2005, Bill Jensen had this very night of the place full of Whitehall Manor personnel and was able to get a motion to get this thing completely quashed. He had said at that time a raised bridge at this location was not a viable solution. It didn't belong there. It was taken away. A motion was made. It was seconded, and it was cleared. I had put it to the ease. I didn't feel I needed to keep tally on our planning committee that they'd be bringing back after years of trying to put together creative plans to get the Peakway completed at this area and come back with the same exact plan here in 2017. There are other options that can be done there. It's about money. If some of these things are too expensive, then I've waited 17 years. I'll wait until we have the money to do it right. There's no reason to rush at this point to get a bad design. Whitehall Manor was designed with a surface crossing in mind. It worked with the city and the town to have that crossing and those setbacks and those buffers in 2000 to make sure that this met the plan at that time. The plan has changed. It was a bad plan. All the other areas we talked about, these overpasses, we have buffers, we have setbacks, we have plenty of hundreds of yards of green space between bridge elevations and people's backyards. We don't have that here. This bridge doesn't belong here. There are other options that can be done. We can move this bridge south of here. If we were to continue the Peakway and swale it on top of South Salem Street for distance and move south to Apex Barbecue possibly, or further south, to have a point that makes sense, that can be planned to have a crossing, and get that bridge out of somebody's backyard. There's no rush to get it in someone's backyard when we have plenty of undeveloped land that it can be planned to be properly placed. The sound report, I wish you do make time to take a look at it. It's convoluted. It's a lot of data. But there's one key thing. It omits train noise. That is a train-heavy, horn-rattling box, and you're going to put a reflector wall behind these people's houses. We're talking paintings rattling, glasses, amplitudes picking up. It's going to be a real noise problem. I don't know about buffering the noises, how we can manage that. You're going to have blast where the horn comes through the tunnel, you're not going to hear it coming, and then it's in your living room. That study omitted peaks of brakes, trucks, horns. It's just not a really comprehensive plan. Of course, we're looking for more of the environmental impact studies to come. March 8th, new CSX Railroad CEO and chairman of the board is in place. Opportunity for this town. I was excited to know that our town manager and our mayor are interfacing with CSX Railroad. That wasn't made clear in our hearings that we had any contact with them. I think this is a great jumping off point to renew those conversations with CSX Railroad. Michael Ward is committed to a top-to-bottom resurgent in the company, and this might be an opportune time where we're going from nothing, we might as well get something. I see I'm out of time. Please take the courage to make a motion and make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dallas. Ms. Gant?
I have a presentation to pull up, so I just need a second here. I'm here to also speak for Whitehall Manor residents. I don't live on the street that is directly affected this, but I am in the neighborhood. And looking through the plans, one of the things, I'm a photographer on the side.
Sorry,
and
can you introduce your
Sorry.
name and address, please?
Allison Gant, 1006 Cuttington Court.
Okay.
But looking through the plans, it's really hard sometimes to get a concept of what this actually is. So I'm looking at this from a human impact and what this means for the people. We're visual people, we need to see this. So when we see, for example, the renderings that are done, it's taken from up on high, it's hard to get an idea of what that looks like. So here's what we're looking at from South Salem, which is right outside of our neighborhood. So I went to the spot that this is taken from, but took it from the ground. This is a picture, our wonderful Welcome to Apex sign here. This is what this would look like with a bridge currently as designed based on that location. And now here's our neighborhood and what we're talking about. And you can see these plans, they're crazy, and these are just the renderings, and this is supposed to be the angle that's mitigating the impact. So these are the houses here that would be closest to this wall and most affected. However, I know that you guys can see the picture, but that doesn't really speak to you. So these are your houses. And I wanted you to see what this would look like if this was your backyard. So there's walls throughout.
Thank you.
It was a nice Sunday, what can I say?
Yeah.
But I mean, we're not talking about a little bridge here. We're talking a 30-foot wall, and I know we've said we're scaling it down to 26, 28 feet, whatever that is, and while we appreciate that impact, that doesn't change the fact that we are still talking about a huge wall. So if this was your backyard, would you vote for it? I ask that you not vote for it for their backyard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gant. That was very creative. I gotta give you full marks for creativity.
Photoshop always works.
All right, so Maria Sierra, I
Yes.
presume? Okay, and then Greg James and David Barnhart. Okay, good.
Yes, hi. I live in Baranook.
Sorry, name and address.
Maria Sierra. I live in 1005 Baranook Court.
Thank you.
Our cul-de-sac is the one that's going to be most impacted. And my issue here is twofold. First of all, I'm a recent mover here. We came from Miami, and we bought our house in 2015, and nobody told us that there was this going to happen. The second thing is the safety. That's a big issue for me and for all our neighbors. We have a very young, vibrant community with a lot of children, ages from toddlers all the way to 10, 11 years old. They walk the streets, they walk to the pool, they walk everywhere, from school bus when they drop off and everything. That's going to be an issue because unfortunately, as you well know, once traffic is diverted, that traffic pattern is going to stay, despite the fact whether or not the bridge is completed or not. The second issue is the safety of our own neighborhood while construction, as I was listening to all this, construction is going to take at least a year or more, and if it goes by the way I know in Miami how things work, it's going to take even 2 years longer. And apart from that, we have summer is coming. Graben Hall is the main thoroughfare that we have, that you have planned to divert traffic. That is directly across our pool. The kids walk to the pool. We walk to the pool. So that traffic is going to be, right now, there's barely any traffic. That's going to be a thoroughfare. Secondly, while the construction is going on, what's going to be the run-up into our backyards of mud, of pebbles, rocks? When there's a hurricane, who's going to secure the equipment in our backyard? If there's an accident on that bridge, it's going to fall into our backyard. It's a big safety issue. And apart from the fact that it looks awful, but it's still a safety issue. And let alone not talk about the tax devaluation of our property. We, invested in a certain amount of acreage. Now we're not gonna have it because they're gonna be taking it away. Tax values are gonna, go down, and as you well know, fair value is not market value. So, what's gonna happen to our future of our homes whenever we actually want to sell them? So it's going to be impactful, and tax money is also going to leave your coffers because our properties won't bring that much, tax money in because of the devaluation of the property and the neighborhood.
Thank you, Ms. Sierra.
Thank you.
Mr. James?
I'm multitasking, so I'm just going to read straight from what I have.
Say hi.
My name is Greg James. I live at 1771 Spring Valley Lane with this little guy, Luke. I brought my son with me tonight not only due to a schedule conflict with my wife, but as a reminder as to why I'm speaking to you tonight. Including my son and my daughter, who is due in May, there are about 20 children who live on my half of Flint Valley Lane and Guilestone Drive. This does not include the well over 100 children who live further down Flint Valley Lane, on Padstone Drive, and other connecting residential streets. They all remind me that Salem Village residents want what everybody wants: a safe, quiet neighborhood with access to all the amenities that make Apex an amazing place to live. On the website, it states that on December 20th, council discussed not wanting to see James as a major collector, James Street. There was discussion with staff regarding collector streets and driveways. Council wished to see a medium solution between collector streets, and then for this to come back to council. Recently, Shannon Cox let me know that the town anticipated to have a consultant under contract for this work in the March-April timeframe. The town would then work with the consultant to schedule this update project, anticipated several months away for engagement with the community for opportunities to speak. That being the case, my neighbors and I would like to express that we'd like to see what we'd like to see as part of the new classification of a residentially friendly collector option. The intention of the James Street extension closely matches the definition of a minor collector: to collect traffic from local access streets and carry it to the major thoroughfare system. We would like the new collector option to more closely resemble this basic definition. We'd like to see an expansion of the council's desire to not allow private driveways. We'd like this to also include direct access to parking lots. We'd like to see a maximum speed limit of 25 miles per hour. Appropriate traffic calming measures must be allowed to be instituted to discourage speeding to close to over 400 households and future households in developing areas in Apex. Multiple options for traffic screening and sidewalk roadway distances must be presented for public comment. This potential collector will be located next to and directly behind a number of homes on .16 to .20 acres. Adequate space must be provided for the quality of life we all expected when moving to Apex. Thank you for the time and addressing the council. I'd like to give a shout out to this guy. It's past his bedtime and he's been fantastic.
Did a good job.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Good
Mr.
job.
James.
Good job.
Say bye.
Bye.
Mr. Barnhart, and then Craig Vance, and I see Jeff Roach's name on here as well. All right.
Hello, Dr. David Bernhardt, 1003 Barrow Court. A lot of my neighbors have already been up here, so I will try to shorten what I talk about and not talk as much about the safety and the aesthetics. A lot of that has been shown to you already. I want to talk a little bit more about access and what you're actually hoping to get out of this bridge. We've been talking about how we would like to have curvatures, movement of the bridge, and all those other aspects to try to alleviate some of that pressure on our neighborhood. But it's more than just that. In our neighborhood, when you're going to be building this bridge, you're not only cutting off towing, but you're also increasing traffic past our neighborhood. You're also preventing us from being able to safely get out onto Salem Street from our neighborhood in one of the only 3 accesses we have, which will now basically make 2.5 by turning Towey as a right-in, right-out. That Salem entrance is going to be needing to cross 3 to 4 lanes of traffic to head to downtown. And that traffic's going to be increasing in order to be able to get to the Peakway and to get to 540. As Apex grows, so does the traffic. And speaking of that traffic growing, it's not just Apex that is growing in this neighborhood. We also have 2 other towns to the south of us. And what are they using? They're using 55. And they're clogging up 55 at the one point that matters most, under the bridge by William Street and Salem. The Peakway is supposed to alleviate that. It's supposed to redirect traffic into residential areas to try to make it easier for people to get around town and to make it easier for people to get down 55. But as Apex grows, so does Holly Springs, so does Food Arena, and those people are still coming. That traffic will be delivering some to the Peakway, and it's going to make our lives more dangerous, and it's going to make it harder for us there, but it's also not going to relieve your problem. 55 will still be clogged. You will still have the same problems throughout town, and it will still be an issue. The Peakway is a Band-Aid that doesn't even cover the wound, and it instead just damages the other part of the city. Makes it less beautiful, makes it less small, and instead makes it more dangerous for the residents who live there. Instead, you need to focus on where the problem truly is. Save your money. Figure out what you need to do with CSX and to solve the true problem, how to get 55 bigger and able to actually handle the true traffic and the true hazards that are coming through. Don't send them into our neighborhood. That's not going to solve your problem. It's only going to make things worse. It's only going to make it more dangerous for us. You know where the problem lies. Put our money and our effort into that. You don't need the Peakway to make it better. You can make it better with CSX. You can just focus on 55. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnhart. Craig Vance?
Hi, my name's Craig Vance, and I live in Whitehall Manor at 1004 Proper Court. And I don't know if I can pull this up, but I agree. First, I want to thank you for the great questions about the development. And I'm one of the people that's directly impacted by the easements, and I just wanted to show, I don't know if I can on this. Okay. I live right here in 1004 Proper Court. My neighbor and the neighbor next to him are both impacted with a easement that comes up to our back porch. So essentially, we're losing our entire backyard. Again, this is a possible easement. It's possible it's a utility easement. It's possible it's a construction easement. It's possible it's a permanent easement. But none of that will be really known until the plan is adopted and then the details are worked out. And that's my biggest complaint, is that the plan gets adopted and then all the details are worked out. This easement literally comes up to our back porch, the corner of the back porch. So even if it's a temporary easement, we are going to lose the use of our backyard for a year during the construction phase. And if you look at the property line, I don't know how you could financially compensate fair market value for taking that much of the house away. So I would ask, I don't support this plan, and a very best outcome that the plan gets averted or changed, but in the very least that you take the impact of the easements into consideration and do what you can to minimalize those so that they're not as big a burden on the houses along the Apex Peakway. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vance. All right, this time I'm down to the last one on the list, Jeff Roach.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Jeff Roach, Peak Engineering and Design. I appreciate the time tonight. I am here for a totally different project. I am actually here to give you guys some props. I wanted to say publicly thank you.
Whose houses are those?
Is that your house?
There's no retaining wall. I'm not going to show a picture of retaining wall behind it, I promise. Seriously, I wanted to say thank you guys. This is Germain Village. This is a project that we came in front of council in 2014. It's off of Herbert Street, pretty close to downtown, actually right adjacent to the CSX railroad tracks. Just wanted to give you guys a real quick update and say, like I said, thank you for trusting me, for trusting the builders that are in there to do a good product. These are a little bit smaller lots than you typically see. This is the workforce housing. It kind of goes along with James Street. The two builders that are in here are going to be the same two builders in James Street. They're looking at the same product. So what I've done is kind of did a real quick timeline here. We got rezoned in 2014. We started construction plans in 15, approval in 16, and started construction of the roads. They've sold 4 houses so far. Not a single one of them hit the market. They started building them. They had people knocking on their door trying to get in there because of the price point, the ability to come in and build a semi-custom house for around $300,000. Granted, that's not a $250,000 starter home, but it is a detached home in Apex. When we talked, we were talking $280,000 in 2015 when we first started talking. And I actually talked to one of the builders, Bill Cotton, Cotton Custom Homes, and he said it's all material costs, it's going up. So he was right around that $300,000 price when he first budgeted. They just keep getting pushed up when they do different flooring, and you'll see here in a second. This is Lot 2, closest to Herbert Street. It's a really neat product if you get an opportunity to go by there and take a look when he does some open houses. This house is now occupied. You can see from a backyard view as well as the inside. It's a very open floor plan. This is first floor with all hardwood floors. The house next door, same thing. It's a one-car garage, a little different, gets you a little bit bigger porch. These are some pictures of the house, an upstairs picture, backyard. It actually gave them a backyard, and like I said, these are 40-foot wide lots, and they're about 100 feet deep. So it's a different mentality. People don't want a big yard to maintain anymore in some locations. So these are some of the cul-de-sac lots that are really tiny lots. They're really narrow. John Campamese is building these. You can see the backyard. They've all got porches and fairly big backyards. You have 2 different products. One is narrow and tall. The other is narrow and fairly deep. Cotton Custom Homes is building the first 2 lots, and Empire Contractors did this one, as well as Lot 12. Like I said, this is not an ad for me. This is just a thank you to you guys. I appreciate you trusting in me to get this done. And Bill Cotton and Cotton Custom Homes, as well as John Campamese with Empire Contractors. We look forward to doing this again, hopefully in a bunch more locations here in town where we can do some infill-type projects. So I appreciate the time. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. Having reached the end of the list, I will now close the public forum. We now move to the public hearings section, which, as you can see in the agenda. And by the way, before I move on, I guess I would like to say I want to appreciate and thank everybody for coming out tonight and expressing your views. We watched, we heard, we listened. We do have a lot to consider. It is a difficult pickle, I think, for everyone. I hope you can appreciate the difficulty that we face here. We will certainly work with staff. I know our town manager assures me regularly that he and his staff work very hard to try to hear and mitigate, and when we hear new information, we try to do something with it. And so if there are ways we can mitigate to the best of our ability, we will try to do the best we can. If there are options that have been unexplored, we will take a look, and I hope everybody understands we're trying to do the best we can for Apex. So thank you for coming out tonight. And I apologize for almost running past that. I did want to say that on behalf of the council. I hope everybody feels the same way. With that said, looking at the agenda, there is nothing else left except for now we're down to the closed session at the bottom of page 3. At this time, I'd like a motion for a possible motion to go into closed session for the following purposes. 1, to receive legal advice from the town attorney. 2, to consider terms of property acquisition. And then 3, consult with the town attorney related to the handling of the matter of the City of Fayetteville and the Public Works Commission of the City of Fayetteville versus North Carolina Environmental Management Commission, the North Carolina Department of Environmental and Natural Resources in the town of Cary and the town of Apex. And also 4, to consider terms of property acquisition number 2. Do I have a mayor? Do I have a motion to that effect?
You have a mayor.
I was stuck on that. Motion in a second?
Motion to go into closed session.
Second.
All right, all in favor, discussion? All right, all in favor going to closed session, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, we are now going into closed session. The public is advised there's nothing left on the agenda after that. Thank you. Wow.